What's going on, Lifepointe? How are we today? We awake? We alive? It's a great day. My name's Chris Roop. I'm one of the pastors here. Super excited to be a part of this series as we're wrapping up what's next. And so that's my job. I'm going to land the plane. I'm going to fix all the stuff that Nate said the last few weeks and going to make it where you can understand it. It's what I'm trying to say. Just kidding. He's right here. It's not as fun when you're here. When you're not here, it's a lot more fun. No, it's gonna be a lot of fun. And let me just hit the big vision that we talked about every single week, and then we're gonna dive into the last one of it. But it's people helping people discover full life in Jesus. That's kind of the big vision. Nate's done a great job that first week really unpacking what that means. And so then we've hit kind of three specific ways, what we call the Lifepointe Way. This is what we talk about: culture, context. Here, when you come here, what can you expect to see? How do we live? How do we function in a unique way? How does this play out, in other words? And so we've hit three of those, and we're landing the plane with this concept of serving passionately. That inside of us, God gives us this passions to do something, and then out of that passion we serve. So then the question always comes, then how does that happen? How do I discover what my passion is? How do I discover what my purpose is? And the reality is, if you look around at most churches and most places, the need is incredible. It's a pretty great need, and yet still statistically, only about 10 to 20% of the people who are connected in churches actually serve and give back and work as a part of making God's name great, right? So what's missing? What's happening? What's absent? So I want to step into that and see if I can kind of bring this together and help us to see this. So if you hang out with me, or if you knew me, or if you know me at any level whatsoever, what I'm getting ready to say doesn't surprise you whatsoever. If you're new here, or if you don't know me, and maybe you've just kind of seen me up here or whatever, this might surprise you. I failed the 10th grade. True story. True story. I failed the 10th grade. Those of you that know me are going, yep, that makes a lot of sense. That makes plenty of sense right there. And so here's the deal. I did not care about school whatsoever. I was completely unmotivated. And the reason for that was my family owned a business. My goal was I was going to work that business. I didn't care about school. It meant nothing to me. So what normally drove most people, and those factors were still there, these external things like don't want to be a failure, don't embarrass your family, all that stuff, it was there, but I just didn't really care. I was partying, man. I was having a great time. And so I just failed. So there are consequences when you fail a grade that you don't think about at that time, right? So now I'm in the 11th grade. Not really. I'm in the 10th grade again, twice. There's a whole story about that. I didn't even know I'd failed the 10th grade when I showed up at school. I had book dues and all this stuff. I'd kept some books or lost them or whatever. And so they don't send you the report card back then. It's not all electronic like it is today. They didn't send you the report card if you had fees and stuff. So I didn't even know. And I show up and find out first day of school that I failed. And so I'm in a class. I walk into the classroom. And a 10th grade class, and I had to sit right next to a girl that I had went out with before a couple times, and she knew that I wasn't a 10th grader, and she's like, what's going on? So anyway, that's one of the consequences, but here's the big one that I didn't think about. So come the spring semester, it started to dawn on me, hey, wait a minute, prom's coming up. And 10th graders don't go to the prom. 11th and 12th graders go to the prom. Now, you could go with an 11th or 12th grader, but there was another problem. I was smitten by this girl at another school, and she was a 10th grader. And so two problems. One, she's at another school, and she's a 10th grader. So I either bail on that, find somebody else, but she's a hottie, and I'm trying to work this, right? I'm trying to work it. And so so I went and I asked, and they said, no, you can't go. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm really an 11th grader. No, you're really a 10th grader. We had that awkward conversation. So I started thinking, I got to find a way to go to the prom. Now, my family owns a printing business. Now, you're thinking that I'm going to manufacture them. I didn't have to. I'm in the little area where they're doing the printing, the shop. And I saw tickets. Guess who was printing the prom tickets? Boom, my family was. And so I picked me up a couple tickets for the prom is all I'm saying. And I might have picked up a few extras. I don't know. I might have sold some to my buddies. I don't know. Half price. Maybe that might have happened. I'm not going to say for sure. I was so proud of myself. I'm going to the prom, right? So I solved this problem. It's like, yeah, stop me. So I'm sitting in about a week before the prom. I'm sitting in the classroom. They start passing out tickets to everybody to get it. And I looked at my buddies, and I noticed something. I noticed a real problem. It's a big one. On the back, they had taken a stamp thing, and they stamped the back with this special school stamp thingy-mabob, and then wrote like their name on it, whose ticket it was. And I was like, I don't have one of those stampy things right there. I can't stamp it right. And so I'm like, okay, I got a problem. So I went to work. I came up with another solution. It took me a little bit of time, but I started thinking about this. So I found a male and a female at the school who were not going to the prom. And I said, hey, how about you, Miss Lady Friend, buy you and me a ticket? And then I asked this guy, hey, why don't you buy you a ticket and my girl a ticket? I'll pay for it. I'll give you a little something extra, and you take care of it. So I'd end up buying 4 tickets to get the 2 tickets that I needed to go to the prom, and I went to the prom. Boom, baby. That's right. So here's the thing I'm trying to tell you. I failed the 10th grade, and you would say, that guy's stupid. I wasn't stupid. I just wasn't motivated. Right? See, on the school, you think about it, when I was going to school, it's all extrinsic. It's all these things that are external that was motivating me. It was stuff like, well, I don't want to embarrass my family. I don't want to be a failure. I don't want to have to repeat a grade. I don't want to not have a diploma. I don't want to not go to college. I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to go to college. So I didn't care about that. I mean, it was all those kind of things. What was a diploma going to do for me anyway? It was extrinsic, right? It's external, not nothing I cared about. And all of a sudden, though, you just insert love. You insert a little love into the picture, right? Now, it's no longer extrinsic motivation. It becomes internal motivation, right? Now, so internally, love is involved. And it's amazing what seems impossible becomes possible when you just insert some internal motivation like love. So, here's what I've learned, several things from that. First of all, don't steal tickets to the prom, because it's usually a backup plan there from somebody. But never underestimate the power of motivation. Never underestimate it. And understand what motivates you. Is it external or internal? Because internal motivation makes these things that are impossible possible. So here's what I want you to think about. Internal motivation, let's put this up here, is the invisible engine that drives you and drives what you do. It's this internal engine that's inside of you that gives you the ability to have the energy and the passion to do things and make things happen. So when we think about certain things, we have to evaluate it from that perspective. Now, I'm just going to do this real quickly. Nate talked about this last week. I'm going to talk about it from a different perspective, looking at what is our motivation when we think about going to church. Now, many of these are extrinsic, so let's just shoot that straight. But let's think about this because it really makes a difference. Our motivation for attending church is something as simple as church, then answers a much bigger question about our relationship with who Jesus is and what he's calling us to do. So let's think about that. Why do we go to church? Number one, it's a big one. We're all familiar with this tradition. You know, your family, your parents did it, something that we've always done. We've always go to church. That's what our family has. So your parents did it, their parents did it. It's kind of been passed on. Or maybe it's just something you developed over the years, and so now it's become a tradition for you. It's fine. But just know this. Just because you've always done it doesn't mean you need to do it. So just think about that. Next one is friends. So a lot of times people say, well, I'm new to an area or whatever, and I want to get to know some people, and I'm a Christian. So I want to go to church. I'll meet some other people who are Christians, or at least some other people, so I can have some friends. So we go to church for friends. Another one is duty. There are some of us that are box checkers, and we got to check our boxes. And I don't do really well with box checkers because I don't care about boxes being checked. And so, like when I preach and stuff, I forget to pass out notes and underline. I'll miss things that drive them crazy back there because I don't care. But some of you, if your boxes don't get checked, you have a hernia. You right? It's like, oh my gosh. And then you start getting nervous. And so you've always go to church. Church is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go. So it's a duty. I'll just let that sit for a minute because That's an extrinsic motivation. Business is another one. Believe it or not, there's some people who go and it's a business thing. I want to meet some people. I might make some business transactions. I'll just let that be what it is because you're probably not going to listen to me today anyway. You're thinking about the next deal. You're looking around the room, seeing who drove in on the BMW. Right? Anyway, that's terrible. Some of us go to church out of fear. Yeah, he said, he just said that out loud. Yes, I did. Fear is another one. This is another big one. There are some of us who just don't want to go to hell. We've thought about it, and it's like, that seems like that would suck. I think I'm gonna do that. So let's just go to church. And we even measure it, like, hey, I'm a good person. I go to church. That's not been very effective. The last one is this one, and I want to sit on this one for just 1 second because I think it's important for multiple different reasons. There are some people, and we pastors just love these people. They're our favorites. People who come and say, we go to church because we want to be fed. Now, I'm just going to tell you a secret here. This is going to be offensive, so y'all just go ahead and get ready. If you're easily offended, you might want to walk out. You got about 5 seconds. So, in my house, my kids, the only ones who we feed are the babies. There's a point in time that when a kid gets a certain age, they start. Now, why is that important? Because how many times have we heard, I'm not going to go to Lifepointe anymore because I'm not getting. Well, it's good, baby. Go find another parent to stick a bottle in your mouth. And I could have made that far worse. I could have not thought about it. I debated it. I did. And Ridge back there said, no, don't do that. Don't, seriously. And you think I'm joking. We had this conversation. It was far worse than what we're doing. What I'm trying to tell you this morning is those are extrinsic motivators. First of all, there is tons of information. If you want to be fed, go feed yourself. I mean, the content is out there. That is not, these are extrinsic. Some of these, I don't like that one, so we'll take that one off the list. Go ahead and remove it. Take it off the screen. All the other ones are extrinsic motivators that aren't bad. They're just not what is going to lead you into a diligent walk, a full life with Jesus. They, in some cases, might hinder you, but they are not what motivates us to the point of doing what God is calling us to do. Our ultimate motivation is Jesus. This is what we call the good news, the gospel. Now, all of this feels super, super churchy, what I'm going to say. And it feels weird if you're not a believer, if you're not walking with Jesus, or maybe you're just an attender, a guy who sits on the edge. When you hear stuff like this, it just feels so heavy Jesus-y, and it's like, oh, super religious. But I want you to take a second. Would you just pause on me for one moment and say, I'm going to listen to this from the perspective of somebody whose life has been radically transformed for some reason, okay? And I'm going to try to understand it from that perspective. Not just some weird religious thing that I may not understand or even believe. So here's the thing. I think every one of us knows that there's something missing in our life. It's why we go to work. It's why we pursue love. It's why we do all these things. Most of us, or some of us, get to the point that goes, none of that stuff really fills the holes. Money didn't do it. House didn't do it. A relationship didn't do it. Something's still missing. Well, then some of us realize, oh, there's something intrinsically flawed with me. I feel like, there's something flawed. And so we then discover this man, Jesus, who came to earth. God sent him down here, who said, I'll fix that problem. That problem is sin. So I'll fix it. And he then says, what I'm going to do, you owe a debt that you cannot pay. You've sinned against God, and therefore you deserve eternal separation from God. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to step into the picture. I'm going to pay your sin debt. I'm going to give my life. I'm going to die on a cross. I'm going to pay it. You don't have to pay anything. You're freed. Now, what's crazier than that part of the story is that he then goes on to validate that behavior by then being resurrected from the grave, overcoming death. Why? So that you and I will also one day overcome death. And that's the gospel. That's good news. Now think about this. Listen, I know for some of you going, man, it's just so, that's like out there. It's super religious. But if that happened to me, if that really happened to me, and if my life has been wrecked by that I realize who I am in light of who God is, and then I realize that he has covered my sin debt, and I'm like, wow, and I allow that to penetrate my life and to change me, that becomes, listen, intrinsic. And out of this intrinsic motivation comes life change. Now, that is a huge setup to get to our text. I think it's pretty important, or I wouldn't have done it. But let's jump straight into the text. I'm going to read today Mark chapter 6. We're going to look at a story that even if you're not a big churchgoer, this is a story that you're going to be familiar with. It's the feeding of the 5,000. So let's walk through it. And we're going to start at verse 30 and go down to 44. The apostles gathered around Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while. For many people, they were coming and they were going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in a boat by themselves to a remote place. But many saw them leaving, and they recognized them, and people ran there by land from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. So as he stepped ashore, he saw this huge crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And then he began to teach them many things. And when it was already late, his disciples approached him and said, this place is a wilderness, and it is already late. Send them away so that we can go into the surrounding countryside and villages to buy themselves something to eat. You give them something to eat, he responded. And they said to him, should we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? And he asked them, how many loaves do you have? Go look. And when they found out, they said, we have five and 2 fish. And then he instructed them to have all of the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down, ranks of hundreds and fifties. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed, and he broke the loaves. And he kept giving them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. And everyone ate and was filled. Then they picked up 12 baskets full of pieces of bread and fish. Now those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men, which multiplied somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 to 15,000 people. Whew, that's a lot, right? It's a lot of stuff. So let's think about this. I'm going to start at the very beginning. I'm just going to kind of walk this, and what we're going to do is take the last few weeks, bring it all together into this week. So at the very beginning, let's look at verse 30. The apostles gathered around who? Jesus. Now, one of the things at the time he said, hey, let's get away together. So they had been hanging out with Jesus. They gave up everything. They began to follow Jesus. They centralized their lives around him. And he said, okay, let's get away together. So they're going to even get away and hang out together with Jesus. So the focus is for them is that they gathered around Jesus. We as a church, we gather around a single purpose. It's Jesus. That's our motivation. He is the one who radically changes us, and it's in Jesus that we find freedom and life and all this stuff. So the key for us, and this goes back to week 1 and even really week 2, if you think about it. So in week 1, we find out that our motivation is Jesus, that when we talk about this big picture, the vision of the church, it's people helping people find Jesus ultimately, and then find meaning in this full life that he then delivers to them in Jesus. Then we see in week 2, we started talking about community. So here's a group of people, with me? A group of people who centralize their lives around Jesus. So it's Jesus and then community around Jesus. First 2 big pieces, which we see unpacking here in the story. If you look at all of the whole story of Jesus, when you see the book of Acts, all of this is continuing to be the same thing. Jesus is the focus. They're moving towards him, and he is what it's all about. Then we go down to, and keep in mind, these are the internal motivators that we're talking about. So rather than it being something extrinsic, tradition, I have to do this duty and all this kind of other stuff. No, you take that out. It says, let's find the internal motivators. It's Jesus, and then community with other people who are also around Jesus. Then let's look at verse 34. And here's where the problem begins to creep in verse 34. So he stepped ashore and he saw this huge crowd. So the problem is we immediately see that there's this huge crowd, and guess what? They're hungry. They hadn't eaten. It's been a while. And so at the same time, as he sees this huge crowd, it says that he has compassion on them. Then his heart, it breaks for him. He sees this group of people, and they're hungry. He has compassion on them. And then notice what he even says. It's like they're like sheep without a shepherd. He also begins to see that there's also this internal problem that many of us recognize, that there's something missing in their lives that they've recognized and that they've identified. And he says, so we're going to try to meet all of this. Listen, I don't know if you know this. It's really hard to hear about Jesus and to understand who Jesus is when you're hungry. So a lot of people always struggle with this concept of, well, we should, when we're helping the homeless, well, we need to tell them about Jesus. They're hungry. They don't have a place to sleep. They're not thinking about Jesus right now. They're trying to think about how they're going to survive tonight, right? And so a lot of times we miss that. A lot of times it's having compassion for a person and where they're at and loving them where they're at because you recognize the bigger picture, okay? So that's kind of what's going on here. So if we think about the church, there's this huge need. We as believers, if you come together around this, there's this huge need in the church. If you come to Lifepointe the last several weeks, you already recognize we see the need. God's blessing, crazy things are happening, people keep coming. We don't know where to put everybody. Who knows what's going on? But there's a huge need. You look in our community, the stuff that's going on. And we're going to, one of the big things that we recognized, and we're going to be talking about this more over the next several weeks, but there's 4 churches. We've been working together. We're doing this service next week. Well, we came together. We said, hey, you know what? There's a huge need. We're going back to school, but not all kids are going to be going back to school. Some of them are going to have those off days. They're going to be rotating days. And so what did we say? Hey, let's come together. There's a need. We have compassion. Let's love these kids. And so you know what we're going to do? We're putting together a whole thing, and it's already gone gangbusters, a Fort Mill study hall. It's going to happen every single day of the week for certain students who are at risk in our city. They're going to get to go to this thing every single day on the days that they're not in a physical school. 4 churches working together for the greater good. It's not about Lifepointe. It's about every man, woman, and child having repeated opportunities to hear and see and discover who this person Jesus is. And that's all it's about. That's where generosity comes from. You get the internal motivator figured out. You get Jesus figured out and who he is and what he's about. Then guess what? Generosity comes naturally. You just start saying, hey, what can I do? Let's help. And not only generosity, guess what also comes? You begin to serve. You just begin, hey, here's my life. Take it. It's all yours. It's sharing what you've been shown. God did something for me. Now I'm going to share it with somebody else. That's just the natural byproduct of a relationship and a walk with Jesus. I got to keep going. Check my time. Okay, verse 37. Let me just say this. There's 5,000. There's this huge need. How are we going to meet it? How do we accomplish a task that's before us? We see the need, recognizing that you cannot do it. And this is the big thing I want you to see. So all of a sudden, there's this huge need. They start having conversations. How are we going to meet this need? And here's the reality. That's a lot of people. Right? We all would agree. That's a lot of people. It's impossible. And now oftentimes when we see something in front of us and it's so big, it's so huge, in our mind, how am I going to get prom tickets? It's an impossible task, which is what my friends were saying. Dude, you can't go. Give it up. You're stupid. You're not going to the prom. You're an idiot. That's what I was told over and over again. An impossible task was in front of me, but I had an intrinsic motivation that says, I'm going to figure it out. It's amazing what love can do, right? So here's the thing. In this case, there's something impossible that's before them, and that's exactly where God wants us to be. He wants us to be in this situation where it seems impossible so that we'll be dependent upon him to get it done, where we then have to turn to him and say, okay, Jesus, what do we do? Which is what they said. What do we do? You want us to go to buy some food and stuff? Nah, you don't need that. You don't need to go spend that money. I'll take care of it. What do you got? And so that leads to verse 38, which is pretty amazing. Let's look at verse 38. And he asked them, how many loaves do you have? Go look. And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Now, you read that, it just seems like just a regular random statement. But I want you to think about this. So what do we do? The task is impossible. It's huge. It's enormous. So what do? Jesus says, this is what he said you do. He says, what do you have? He asked a question. Well, what do you have? Okay. So they said, well, I've got these few loaves, these few fishes. So basically he says, go get them. Bring them to me. And that's exactly, so what do you need to do? When something's in front of you and it seems absolutely impossible and your intrinsic motivation is you love Jesus and things in front of you, so what do? You bring him what you have and you just give it to him. And I don't have much. I got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Give it to him. Take what you think is an insignificant, small little thing. What you say, how could God ever use this? Don't worry about that. Right. The question is, will you give it to him? The question isn't what do you have? The question is what will you give him? You with me? I think it's always the problem. We always think about church and we think about these things. We think about missions and all the people who need this. And we look at our city and how messed up it is. And how in the world are we ever going to solve this problem, this racial divide? I don't know. What do you have and what will you give him? That's what he wants to know. Just stop trying to figure out the bigger thing because you can't figure it out. That's the dependency and need for him. This is what you need to understand from this point forward. And I always hear people say this, well, you save that guy. No, Jesus does the saving. You do the serving. That's your part. Jesus takes care of the big work. He does the hard stuff. All he's asking you is, will you serve me? I mean, it's an incredible concept when you think about it. This impossible task that was before him. Jesus said, go get them. They went and got it. He then prays. He multiplies it. And what did they do? They served it. He did the hard work. He multiplied it. And he says, now you serve it. And their role was, okay, God, I'm just going to serve. I'm just going to give you what I have. What seems impossible, what seems absolutely undoable, God will take and he will do incredible things. And you're saying, but Chris, you don't know me. I don't have much to give. I don't have all this stuff. And here's what you need to know is this. All that you have is all that he needs. He doesn't need more than you have. He's not surprised by it. You shouldn't be embarrassed by it. He's just saying, will you give it to me? So let's see what happens. He brings the deal. Let's look at verse 39. Pretty cool stuff. Is it 41? I think it is. Maybe I messed up. Yep, 41. Sorry. Notice what happens. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and he looking up to heaven, he blessed and he broke the loaves. And he kept giving it to them. And he just kept giving it to them as it continued to multiply. And here's what I've learned, that God blessed what they had and made it more than enough. He used it. He holds it up. He blesses it, and it multiplies. You know, and one of the visions that we have here when we think about serving and giving, and one of the reasons a lot of people say, you know, I tell people I'm the multiplication pastor, and they're like, that's the weirdest title I've ever heard. I mean, and the fact that, seriously, the reason I failed, this is ironic, the reason I failed the 10th grade was because I failed math and English. It's a true story. And you're the multiplication guy, right? I'll see how that works. But it comes from here. You know, my role is to help the church to see the need that we need to multiply ourselves. We need more impact leaders. We need to raise up more people to plant more churches. We need more multiplication here in our city. We need more schools to have partners, which requires that we work with other churches. The need is so great. The day that we think it's about Lifepointe is the day that we miss the big picture. It is not about a church, it's about the church, and the church will change the kingdom of God. It brings the kingdom to every man, woman, and child. It's us working together. I'm going to start preaching, so I'm going to stop. Let me jump over and say this. Here's the thing I've learned. It is only God who can change hearts. Listen, as leaders, me and Nate, we can get up here, we can beg you all day. Because the reality is the need out here is great. I mean, the need here, even at our church, it's incredible. Do we have enough people? No, man, not even close. And we can get up here and we can beg and we can plead. Those are extrinsic motivators. And they'll work maybe for a few or for a short term, but they don't change things. It has to take a heart that's been transformed. I had the privilege this summer of getting to work with our summer intern, and incredible story. So we asked him, would he share his story of what God did to him internally and what the result of that was. Would y'all take a second, take a look at Carson's story?
I was really broken and angry with God, even though I wasn't even sure if he was even real. The darkness kind of consumed me. And it was a really, really hard period in my life. I'm Carson. I was a summer intern here at Lifepointe, and I'm currently a senior at Anderson University, majoring in Christian ministry. But getting here, it was a journey. Growing up, I wrestled with God a lot. I really didn't want for God to be real, because I wanted to be fully in control of my life. But the more I was in control of my life, the more I realized that I couldn't control my circumstances. That, the world around me was broken, it was chaotic, and I wasn't actually in control. And this, for me, caused a lot of anxiety and depression. The darkness kind of consumed me. And it was a really, really hard period in my life. Then in high school, this guy from track, he started hanging out with me, and we started doing life together. It was weird to me, because why does this guy care about me? Why does he love me? Why does he listen to my problems? And he told me about Jesus. And I had resentment in my heart, so I really didn't want to hear it. But he talked through how Jesus had died and taken the punishment for all the horrible things I'd done. But the thing that caught me off guard the most and kind of stuck in my head was that he's explained how Jesus did this because he loved me. So I went home and just started processing through all this. And I got to the point where I was tired of admitting that God was real, but living my life for myself. I didn't want to give my life to Jesus and just go to church, just check things off a checklist. I didn't want following Jesus just to be a Sunday morning thing. So I decided to surrender it all. And for me, it was the most freeing thing ever. So after my life had been radically changed by Jesus, I felt like I had found this hidden treasure, the answer to life, the key to life. And I wanted to tell everybody that I knew. So in college, I became a young life leader at a high school in Anderson. And that looked like going to high school lunches, and sitting with a bunch of random high schoolers. It was awkward. It was weird. It was uncomfortable. But it was so helpful for me because it made me leave my comfort zone. I can't do this on my own. It made me really trust fully and fully surrender to God. God, here I am, use me, and you've got to move. And also during this time, I started to realize that serving these people and loving these people wasn't something that I had to do because, you're a Christian now, that's what you have to do. It was something that I get to do. I get to share the secret of life. I get to love these people. I get to lay my life down just like Jesus laid down his life for me. Growing up, I had always planned, I wanted to be an architect. All through high school, that was my plan. I was really passionate about it. But little did I know that he started really putting on my heart the idea of full-time ministry. I wrestled with God a lot, went back and forth, saying, you sure me? I'm not cut out for this. I'm not extroverted. I can't do that. Or I didn't grow up in church. That's not really me. That's not really my thing. And I started to realize that a lot of my resistance towards God's calling was because I didn't believe that he could work through me. Then I started reading about Jesus' disciples and how they were some of the most religiously unequipped guys of the time. They knew how to fish. And Jesus comes to them one day and they're out fishing, throwing out nets, and he says, one of the most simple commands. He says, follow me. They dropped their net, and they got out of the boat, and they followed Jesus. With everything they had, they left their life, and they left everything. The funny thing is that the disciples were still fishermen. Jesus had called them in a new direction. I'm still an architect, but casting vision for God's people in His church. God's called me in a new direction. I don't really know what this looks like. I'm excited to see, but I do know that He's calling me to step out of the boat, to take the leap of faith, and to follow the simplest of commands, to follow Him.
It's an incredible story. Yeah, Carson, and I've got to really hang out with him, hear his story, and just how God's using him and how he is willing to be used is pretty incredible. And what I've learned is this, that if we're gonna create a culture here at Lifepointe, that what we call the Lifepointe Way, and where it's just what we do is we serve passionately. If that's gonna happen, it's gonna require that we find our purpose and our passion. Because that's what it requires. I mean, it requires purpose and passion. And purpose is just like what you heard, this life that's been transformed, not by just some outside thing, but internally, Jesus in us, who we've wrestled with, and we get it. And then we begin to say, okay, God, here's what I have. Just take this and use it. So two things I want you to think about. Number one is, for some of us today, it's really about this purpose. Really discovering for Jesus. Some of us, it's like, okay, the reason that we're not, passionate or trying to figure out how that we can be a part of what God's doing is because we haven't yet found purpose. And so it starts there. And I'd say today, if you haven't given your life to Jesus yet, we'd love for you to do that. And one of the ways you can do that, again, you can communicate that. We'll post a link if you're watching online, or if you're here, we have these cards in front of you. You can grab those. Man, we'd love to hear about that. We have some folks that'll be at the Next Steps area outside at the tent. Love to talk to you, answer those questions. Please don't delay the obedience in getting to know Him, because it's out of that then comes the second part, and that is begin to serve passionately. Maybe today that's where you're at today. It's like, okay, I want to serve, but I don't know where to begin. There's several things. Just start doing something, right? Whatever it is, God, here's what I got, and do it. And then that's step one. Just start doing it. What I learned for me is I just started taking whatever opportunity was in front of me, but I didn't just let it sit there. Then ask the next question while I'm doing that. It's, God, how have you wired me, and what are you calling me to do ultimately? What am I passionate about? This passionate comes out of this relationship that I have with you. So today I want you to wrestle with that. And today, here's what I'm just going to shoot you straight. There's opportunities. I mean, we need you right now. We can give you those opportunities right now. In the next several weeks, you could start serving immediately and start just doing something to begin to do whatever it is God's calling you to do ultimately. And so we're going to put up on the screen here a number. You can just text real simple the word serve to the number that's on the screen, and begin to just start the process of serving somewhere. Okay? So I'm going to leave that up there. I want you to think about it. But here's what I want to do. I'm going to close the service with a song. And I'm going to pray over you. And I just want you to let God begin to speak to you. Can we do that? Let's pray together. Just right where you are. We're just going to, I want this just to remain a time of just reflection. We're just going to have this song sung over us. And as we do, I just want you to think about this. Those two big things. Has God wrecked your life? Have you had this intersection with Him that has transformed you from the inside out, much like what Carson talked about, this light that came on all of a sudden? And maybe for some of us today, it's like, I've given my life to Jesus. I get that, but man, I'm struggling. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't think I'm worthy enough, or maybe I'm too busy. Whatever it is, will you just say, okay, God, I don't know, but here's what I have. I'm going to put it in your hand, and God, I know that you're the one who will multiply it, not me. Father God, in the name of Christ, move in this room, speak to us. God, begin to encourage those who need encouragement. God, people who need transformation, will you just wreck their lives with the gospel? May they discover you and discover this full life that we've been talking about over and over again. God, we just give this time to you. Would you move in Christ's name?